The wellness is just taken as a side factor or as a side policy, something which is not in the DNA itself.
Till AI comes by and takes away. But right now, I think we're all people. So well-being is absolutely, I think, the DNA and core of the business.
When you provide a safe space, you see that your team are thriving and not just performing and not just delivering, they are thriving.
Statistics show that there is an increase of 23% profitability if employees are more engaged.
And most of the time, an employee out of 24 hours, they spend maximum time in a work atmosphere.
Correct.
If the organization doesn't take care of the wellness of the person as a mandatory thing, then they don't have anywhere to go.
Hello, everyone. We are here at Roundtable Central, hosted by Brand Story, and we are discussing the topic Blueprint of Wellness, Building a Culture of Care. I'm Shifali. I'm a mental health professional. I take care of well-being, health and wellness, CSR and DI at Credit Suisse in India. And today I have a panel here. On my right, we have Samishra Mazumdar.
Hi, Shibali, and thank you for giving me this opportunity. I run this venture called Mindfully Sorted. We focus on empowering minds and mental health. Our main area is working women and working adults. And we are spending 15 plus year in HR. I'm on the other side trying to do something more meaningful and purposeful in the same space.
Thank you, Samishra. We have Trissa George.
Yeah, thank you, Shifali and Brand Story and the entire panel for having me here. I am Tressa George. I run Softness Consulting. I'm a fractional CHRO and I help small and medium businesses with their HR strategies and practice. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Hemlata Anirudh.
Hi, I'm Hemlata Anirudh, the founder of HWH Living. I'm a health psychologist and a nutritionist. I work with people to help them prevent and manage chronic conditions using a combination of nutrition, exercise, and mental health. Thank you so much, Brand Story, for having me here.
Thank you. I have Dr. Wing Commander, Mr. Subramaniam.
Thank you, Shifali, and for Brand Story. I am Dr. Wing Commander Nagasubramaniam. I'm a healthcare professional who had been a clinician, then an administrator, and now an entrepreneur. I'm a co-founder and director of Unisha Service Foundation. We work with the underprivileged in various sectors, especially health and education and skill development.
Thank you. So let's begin. I just wanted to probably share my thoughts and ask your opinion. When we talk about organizations or business, for that matter, what is that one thing or what are those things that any organization should do so that both the factors are completed or met, which is purpose or the targets of the business, basically aligning with the business objectives with the employee wellness? What is something that is missing? And I feel what is missing is that it's not in the DNA. The wellness is just taken as a side factor or as a side policy, something which is not in the DNA itself. Probably if you want to start, Tressa.
So, as you rightly said, I don't know if it's missing or not, but what's very important for businesses is to see that wellness is not, can have. It is absolutely something that you must have. It is a driver of your business. In businesses, till AI comes by and takes away, but right now, I think we're all people. And people who are engaged, who are happy, productive, are really what matters to your business and helps you sustain your long-term productivity and build your future businesses. So well-being is absolutely, I think, the DNA and core of the business and must have. That's my opinion.
Right, I agree. And probably if any one of you want to show some light.
I feel one of the focus that the organizations today probably are centering around, and especially post-COVID, the landscape has changed a lot. Post-COVID, and we have been working post-COVID. Our venture started during the COVID. And we have seen that the kind of traction people are having, the employees asking for well-being benefits, well-being opportunities, that's kind of driving the whole ecosystem in terms of organization also taking care. The second part of it is that, if you ask me what is one thing that needs to be focused, while there are so many ways in which you can capture, but the intent of organization is to create a safe space. I think that safe space is the fulcrum of everything that you do, whether you want to shoot out as a business growth or innovation or transformation, or you're doing your next strategy for AI. Safety, when you provide a safe space, you see that your team are thriving and not just performing and not just delivering, they're thriving.
So completely agree with you. And on the part of the safety, I think psychological safety is something that we see is missing at this point of time. Probably leadership is aligned, but maybe people managers are not. And I see Hemlata nodding that. Probably you have some insights here.
Yes, I think why it makes business sense, first of all, to answer your first question on why it makes business sense to address or build wellness in the DNA, like you rightly said. Statistics show that there is an increase of 23% profitability if employees are more engaged. Right? When engaged means they feel at ease with the goals of the company, they feel they're being taken care of, and psychological safety actually is directly related to job satisfaction. And when employees feel psychologically safe in an organization, they label or they determine that particular workplace as less toxic. So, and when that happens, the brand value of an organization increases. So I think psychological safety is at the crux of how people feel. And when people feel psychologically safe, they're able to actually be more creative, get their ideas out there. And so yeah, it does make business sense, like all of us have been talking about, because it shows in the numbers. There's data that shows that TSR, total shareholder return, increases up to 25%, 5 to 25% during mergers, during transformation, if organizations focus on the organizational health.
That's really true.
Yeah, I agree with the views expressed. One thing I want to bring back, the mind plays an important role over matter. Why employee wellness becomes a more important factor in today's times. We are all in a nuclear family setup. Many of them are migrated from villages, small towns. So they are coming with a very thin comfort zone. They are working in a very thin comfort zone. And most of the time, an employee out of 24 hours, they spend maximum time in a work atmosphere.
Correct.
If the organization doesn't take care of the wellness of the person as a mandatory thing, and they don't have anywhere to go. That's why you can see the type of people take their own life and the road rages, which all happens. This is all an indication where it is important that the organization as a service to the society itself, they have to take care of this wellness. They have to
Right.
put it in their head.
Absolutely, I agree with you. And while we were talking about the importance of wellness, overall wellness, holistically in any organization, but I feel the challenge at this point of time is, are we bringing it in the DNA, or is it like a side policy or side venture? Because a lot of times what I've seen is that it's generally seen as an HR activity or an HR responsibility. How do we go ahead with leadership buy-in? Is there any challenge that you're facing? Like, I've personally, in my experience, felt this, that leadership buy-in is a challenge because probably it's not aligning with the business strategy, or it's not a priority. So that gap is missing, that it is a part of your culture. You'll have more employees working for you happily and showing progress if it's in the DNA. So what is everybody's opinion on this?
What I'd say, I'll actually give you an example, right? So recently, when I was consulting with an organization, a sales organization, which had very high sales, and they were making very high sales commissions. But what was happening was that there was a lot of high attrition, and just people just couldn't just figure out what the reason is. So so there was this conversation that was happening, and when we looked at data and analysis, what we realized is why people were doing well financially, there was a lot of burnout that was happening, right? So we looked at elements like what commission people were making, what were the exit interviews, what is the other trends, and what are our wellness data saying, to realize that it was really burnout that was causing all this. And like you rightly said, if leadership doesn't step in, we cannot correct it. So what we had is we had the leadership step in, making a very bold statement saying that this particular team will have a mandatory 1 week wellness week where they can focus on themselves, focus on the thinking, and focus on learning. But elements like target, etc., is sort of toned out. So they still have their quarterly targets, but during that time, there is nobody that chases them. So the moment leadership stepped in and made that difference, initially there were a lot of leadership, managers who were pretty skeptical about it. But what we saw over a period of time is that really, really worked. So leadership by actually stepping in makes all the difference. So that's been my experience.
So I think a beautiful story and example, what exactly what you're saying. It's a reaction. What happened here, exactly what she mentioned, is that we reacted to a problem.
Correct.
We did not do it as a DNA. We did not feel the need without an issue. When there is a suicide, we get calls saying that, can you do a workshop so that the managers, and people are able to manage the situation and they don't feel the organization was somewhere responsible for anything. Right? It's always a reaction mode that we do. Okay, there is an attrition. Can you come and see what you can do from a mental health perspective so that, people, there's a work from home policy. We want to bring back people. So they call us to say that, can you do a strategy where we can enable people, they can be more motivated to come from office and work. So it's always a reaction. And I feel when you say DNA, and I think with all being in both the side, I've run HR for organizations, and I know that the focus is to increase your bottom line,
Right.
your revenue, your margins. Is there a regular clear cut connect from point A to point B, that if I do this 5-step in mental health, if I have a counseling system, if I train my MAP people, if I have a emotional first aid programs, is it directly going and connecting? I don't think so. But having said that, we don't have those metrics a number. But having said that, this is from my personal experience that we have worked with many startups and mid-sized organizations specifically, which are new age and we are more open to the whole concept of mental health. So, and we love working with them. So what happens there is, because they are so open for mental health or intervention, whether it's an authentic leadership program, whether it's an emotional first aid program, whatever we do, therapist sitting in office. So whatever we are able to offer, the consumption is very high. There is no, the leadership very open and feels like, yeah, these are the right things to do. Rather than going out for a team outing, they will do a retreat where we take a pause, be in the nature, and then, learn about each other more authentically. So when they do all of it, the whole aspect of innovation, transformation, etc., creativity, they can see real difference vis-a-vis other organizations which are so structured in processes where things are just becoming a tick mark. So the transition is slowly being visible, but are there matrices to measure? Yeah, I think those are things that we really need to do.
Yeah, I agree with you when you say that, in any organization for that matter, it's a reaction. And why I can say that is also because that's something in my experience, I've seen it as well. Okay, because it's trending, let's have something, a wellness program. Or maybe because there's an incident, let's have it. That's very right about that fact. So, but at the same point of time, there's also in terms of the reaction, it does fizzle out. We roll out a certain wellness program in something and then it fizzle out. So what do you think about maybe how should we go about in any organization that it doesn't fizzle out?
So one of the things that I think successfully organizations have done is including well-being as a KPI, as a key performance indicator. You're talking about matrices, right? How do we figure out matrices, make it the part of your KPIs for leaders? Yeah, your team's well-being is what drives your KPI. So that way, managers and people managers and leaders are able to truly focus on it. Companies have used programs where they've used empathy as a core skill, driven that, and actually has helped build that connection with managers and because a lot of these studies and surveys talk about how Shanisha were talking about authentic leadership. Unless they see their leaders, their managers show authenticity, show that they are bought into the well-being programs, they are actually implementing well-being programs, they themselves don't want to do it, right? So what we see is the opposite, right? We just see that these wellness sessions or wellness packages are done, the leadership stays away from it, it's just a tick mark, and that's why it never ever trickles down to being as implemented as that we want it to be. And it just merely becomes, okay, we have done this because ISO 45003 standards require you to do certain things, and organizations want that particular standard, and so we just got it done. But is it truly being done after the particular session is done? That's something that we have to think about.
So I would like to share some thoughts on this. So one thing is having a structured program for looking after all this, using a metrics or anything. But at the end of the day, the leadership style, the way we are reaching out to the staff in a formal and informal way matters. Like for example, I was heading a hospital, one of the corporate hospitals. So we had the least attrition in the country in our organization. My unit had the least attrition. So what I used to do, I used to reach out to I know each of my staff personally. We had around 250 staff are there. I used to know them personally. I know what is they're going through. Apart from the HR initiatives, there are so many structured way of or way the things there. But you get certain information where you can do the course correction. Most of the time, what I have seen in organization is, as she said, there is a ivory tower syndrome. You stay, the leadership stays away. They said, I have rolled out a program. That should happen. But ideally, that connect doesn't happen. That last mile connectivity doesn't happen. And the employee is not getting inspired. They are not there. Most of the time, they don't know for what purpose this is being done. Oh, HR initiative, they'll come and do things sincerely, but they don't. What is the value they have taken back? That is not assessed properly. That's what I felt. So when I interact with them in an informal way, I come to know about certain things, which I give a feedback to the team, and the course correction is done.
Right.
So having structure, process is all fine, but at the same time, there is a human behind that, and human mind works in a very different way. Like how you take things when something is told, maybe entirely different from how she perceives.
Correct.
So we should understand that, and we should try to address that issue. Until that is not done, this will all be namesake initiatives.
Right, like you said, it's about the leadership buy-in. They should be involved in the whole process. And like you also mentioned that there are organization, and I understand there's an organization which has 4 pillars as a part of their KPIs, right? Emotional, mental, physical, and purposeful. And the leaders are required to be, measured on these points, and how their teams are performing. This, of course, helps. And there are other organizations which have, I think, policies like you don't have to really tell why you're taking a leave. It can be because of your mental well-being or your physical well-being. It is something that you don't have to explain. Then there are organizations which also encourages a lot of, what went right in the past week. It's fine. There could be some things we are not good at, we didn't do well, but let's celebrate what we've done well. So ultimately, it comes down to leadership buy-in and also the policies to an extent, even though well-being or health and wellness is not just about policies, but what are these policies and strategies and how do they impact is ultimately probably the next question we need to ask ourselves, and as a part of different organization, that what change should come in, let's say, policies and strategies. What are your thoughts on these?
I would like to share in this static policies, man. See, what happens is, like an employee in an organization, there are different types of employee joins. Where are they coming from? Some might be coming from an urban setup, some might be from a rural setup, some might be from a semi-rural. So they are coming from various types of setups. They would have studied in a very premier institutions, or they would have studied in a government institutions. Is the organization at the time of entry, are they mapping their from where they are coming from, what is their motivation. I'm not sure, I've not seen it happening that the organization, you people, we have in HR, you can tell us whether the organization maps these things at the time of joining. For example, this person comes from a village background, he is from a middle class, or he's first time generation learner. So everybody reacts in a different way on what is their attitude. Basically, are they having a positive attitude or an indifferent attitude or a negative attitude? If these kind of metrics are captured in the beginning of the person joining an organization, then you can deliver. Now even in medicine, it has become chemotherapy, cancer chemotherapy is not given in a uniform manner. As per the patient's need, it is being fine-tuned. So is the HR policies fine-tuned to the individual aspirations and needs of the employees, or is it given in a general manner? If this is thought of, then the receptivity of the program might be better. Like, for example, an urban guy, he will be open to all these things because he has already seen this kind of structure. But the person coming from a rural background, he will be very close to it. He'll be scared to interact. Then the HR might think, oh, this person is not good. He is not at all open. So he's labeled, branded. So are we doing that, or are we trying to understand what is their need and promoting them?
So what you're suggesting is tailor-made is required.
Tailor-made. All we're doing a tailor-made analysis so that we can give a tailor-made solutions.
While I agree with you on the tailor-made aspect, but it's also the number of new hires in any organization is huge. So it's also very difficult to do those metrics. And
But
also,
pattern, you can put them into the compartments. Oh, this
but are we being inclusive there?
only 4 compartments: rural, urban, semi. Like that, you put in a gross by this thing and just see some variations, and then come.
Well, I have a different thought on that because, and I'm like, please go ahead and share that. Are we being inclusive? Are we labeling them because of their certain backgrounds then?
No, it is not about labeling or being inclusive and all those things. That is not the thing. Like, for example, I am basically a shy person. Okay, I'm coming from rural background. I don't know to speak in English. I am closed, but I'm intelligent. But now you're not letting me to giving me an opportunity level playing field. It's an inclusiveness on the other side. It is not the organization focused inclusivity. It is the employee focused inclusivity. Is it happening or not?
So what I'd say is there that the beauty is that we are in the technology era, right? So it really gives us the opportunity to actually tailor make some of these things. So
Yeah.
in some sense, you can talk about rural, urban. There are so much other diversity. There could be, different sexual orientation. There could be people with, especially abled people and all of that, right? So people have different needs at different point of time. So some of the good practices that I've probably seen, right? So an organization that I knew, I still know, like they actually have a gender transition toolkit. So there is a team member who's transitioning from from a male to a whatever transition to, right? So being able to do that, there are organizations like somebody who doesn't maybe needs emergency fund is required. So organizations are actually helping with emergency funds. So there are different aspects which the organization looking at, and having different policies that meet different needs is the need of the hour. And even if you've not captured that at time of joining, I think technology really gathers that information because there's so much information going around. So.
I think one of the things that I always feel is, and this has been my personal experience, and I definitely put that across, when organization wants to do a lot for the employees, that employees have to own their journey. I can have multiple processes. Today, if you go back to the data and see EAP percentile worldwide with all the organizations providing EAP services is less than 4%.
Yeah.
Less than 4% people. All the helplines that were there during COVID have dried and dead. Did anyone stop anyone from going out and reaching out for help? Right? No. But still, there are so less people who actually wants to go and seek help.
Correct.
So that's where customized certain designs that we do comes in, because we are trying to create that, again coming back to my first point, the safe space. And how do we metricize safe space? Can we put metrics to the safe space? We know KPIs and all of it. We have done generations of KPIs. Being in HR, KPIs are year after year tweaking the KPIs, but we also know ultimately what matters is who is bringing the business and who is delivering to my client,
Right.
right? And every other KPI become okay to have and not a priority.
Right.
I always personally feel it is again a leadership's belief, the DNA into the value system, and also the educating people right from the manager to everyone that we are facilitating, we are providing everything, but it is you who own, and we are providing a safe space where I don't judge if you're changing your gender, I don't judge you whether you're coming from a rural or an urban. It's a safe space. It's just anyone can do anything. So
Right.
it's how do you put it in metrics is again a something like in L&D they cannot ever, lot of research and studies keep
Yeah.
going on, but no one can put a number that okay, because this much is invested in L&D, this much is directly impacting sales.
Yeah.
I think it will take us some years of evolvement, but awareness is the key to begin with, at least to start.
Yeah, I think
When she told, I just remembered one image which came in WhatsApp. There is a compound wall is there. On that side, something is happening. There are 3 people, different heights. So if they keep all of them stand like this, only one person can see that side. So they keep some support, different supports are kept, different height support. So that at the end of the day, they're all standing equally looking outside.
Yeah.
So are we doing like that?
I think equality versus equity is what comes into picture, right? Are we, sacrificing equity in the quest for equality? But one thing that comes into mind is why is it on the individual to seek help? I framework is what we're all focusing on, right? Wellness means, acha, we have given you a wellness initiative. It's on the individual to take. But
Yeah.
when we make it into an S framework, a system framework, change the organization culture, be telling you that the whole culture is built around safety, is built around wellness, then it becomes easier for no matter which label they associate with, for them to come and seek help, because help is available as a culture. For example, when we not put them in buckets, but actually the leadership shows up authentically, becomes an ally, and shows that I am okay with you showing up as authentically, depending on whatever is your representation, be it age or race or gender or sexual orientation. Then employees also feel that okay, I can show up because my leader shows up. I think that's something that we have to think. Everything comes down to leaders at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
But I think, yeah, we need not put them in labels. We need not strive for equality, but equity, we need to figure out how to be more.
Right.
Right, being vulnerable. Are the leaders
Yeah,
vulnerable? Like, can a leader, be vulnerable and in probably be, why you say authentic? At the end of the day, it's like, can I be vulnerable in front of at least my first layer?
Correct. Correct.
Right? If not, so if I am open and I am vulnerable, and that gives the space for other person also to come into this.
Absolutely.
And I think the vulnerability is such a beautiful space, but we feel vulnerability is weakness. We feel a very, the masculinity culture that is there around. That kind of course, it's changing with the time, but it's a very, very slow pace.
Yeah, actually, employees might be very, open and not covering is the word that is being used. But as they grow up and start going towards C-suite and exec level, they start covering more and more and becoming less authentic of what they are. They want to fit into the organizational culture or what it looks like. Yeah, it looks like to be in that particular seat. So I think we need to revisit what it means to be here.
I think it's also a lot of, like you rightly said, as they grow up, it's also because they're deprioritizing certain things that is your probably overall well-being, your wellness, your priorities. It's more about, okay, what's the number? They are at the back of the mind, there's somewhere that awareness is there. Probably this is not correct. But yet again, the weight is, let's see if there's any situation happening or there's a reaction to it. If there's some employee saying that this is not well, then let's start that program again, or maybe then I'll focus on it. And I think it's also about the psychological safety, what we were saying. Even at a junior level, maybe somebody is not really comfortable talking because that manager is amazing or a taskmaster, but maybe when it comes to the other aspect, being empathetic, maybe they're not really good at it. And that's where that gap is, because some of them really work in silos, and that's become a problem, because then as a employee, I may not be comfortable talking to my manager if my manager is working in silos and is a taskmaster, not opening up or being vulnerable. That's where.
I think that's a beautiful space in terms of lot of time no one has taught us how to be some basic thing, taught
Yeah.
us to be vulnerable.
Correct.
In from childhood, we don't know how to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
Or even how to listen to someone. Right. So we do this program called emotional first aid training, and we do a lot of with the managers where we feel very surprised that, when we do the first round of discussions, they're always ready to give advices.
Yeah.
I want to give advice, and they feel they did a great job because
Yeah.
they gave a lot of very valuable advice, which they felt is very valuable, right? But they don't know that, all that the person wanted is a safe space to share and someone to just listen.
Yeah.
And they themselves know how to work around. And that's where I feel that everyone owns their journey. But at the end of the day, some level of hand-holding training
Yeah.
to people is definitely one of the very important focus that I feel before the policies and procedures. It's the awareness through the trainings and everything that can build in a change in the whole
Yeah.
But one thing in this I want to add upon is this the HR induction. How people take it. Anything which is taught in the first 1 week of an employee's lifespan, if that gets into their mind, then it will stay for their lifelong. But unfortunately, what I have noticed is that that induction is something like a ritual where lot of information is given, and half of the things are so it's this kind of thing like wellness in workplace. It is an important thing because that determines how the employee and the organization is going to travel together. Why not that wellness focused induction happens in the beginning? Because that is a time that employee will be completely receptive to what is being told. That is one aspect. Second aspect is like suppose somebody, this is for the fresher. Now a person, mid-level person joins. Now that person is, mujhe HR induct, I know. They will not even listen to it. Now that is where the HR professional should catch the middle level and the senior level people also have to be made to go through a wellness based focused training so that they understand it. Like as she said, that vulnerability comes in once they think, oh, it is for others. Always we feel that all these things are for others. They have to be made to feel at the first week of joining, whether at a low level, starting level, mid level, or senior level. That first 1 week, they have to be caught and they have to be inducted. They have to be brainwashed for this wellness to become a culture. So I'm just saying Tuesday because otherwise, this is I know. And people at senior level, when they come over with the numbers, this thing. But they're not understanding it is a tangible and intangible things in life, isn't it? Like a building is standing, that cement which binds the organization, that watering. Those are the important things. That is done in the beginning of the building, right? Now you don't water this pillar. You water it when it was beginning, when the bricks were kept and the cement was done. That is the time you have to do the watering to make it stronger. But now, after this building has come, you water. What is the use of? And doesn't even go inside.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think induction is very important. So during induction, you should absolutely talk about your organization framework, your culture, your wellness, and all of that.
Well focused.
But I think it's also important that around the year there are constant reminders because I might, when I'm like you said, when you're the beginning, there is a lot of information why you might do a wellness session, but there are so many things that the individual is interested in so many things, but focus sessions where you are training or creating awareness both among employees and as leaders as to how to make that difference. I think that a combination of induction and constant reminders is something which we
Correct. And I totally agree with you, because it's again boils down to, are we doing it because it's required or we truly believe in that? And that's what the year-round reminders are for. Moving on to that bit, sometimes there's also a reaction, or sometimes you would hear a lot of HR would say that, because I've been on the both side, that we are trying to build it as a part of our culture, but there's also no response or reaction from the employees as well, because maybe let's say we have organized something for the employees and there is a beautiful interactive opportunity where also they're learning about wellness, but there's nobody responding or attending to it. I feel that it could be because the priority it boils down to what are the numbers, or this is my to-dos for that day, and so on. But there could be other factors as well. There could be lack of interest as well. Maybe that lack of insight, rather, that I do not require this. I'm not the one who really needs this. So that awareness also needs to be, I think, year-round, need to be reminded that it's okay. Again, coming down to being vulnerable, that it's okay. It's not necessarily have to be something that require. So the concept of wellness is quite, sometimes people confuse it with going to a psychiatrist and taking medication. They don't really understand the concept of stress and how loosely we're using the term OCD or depression. That itself, I think, is taking, it's working on, it has its both pros and cons, I feel.
Shruti, one thing that you said, why are people not really using these wellness programs? When the house is on fire, that is the workplace is on fire, you don't really think about your wellness, right? Like we were talking earlier about care washing. Most big organizations even practice this care washing, where like, Acha, we have a mindfulness session for you. We did that last month, and that's the end of it. And most often, employees don't feel care about. They're like, you're not addressing my systemic issues. Yeah, again, boils down to systemic issues, and you're just talking about giving me a workshop on stress or a workshop on diet or anything,
putting a band-aid to your wound, basically.
but you are not really talking about how my work-life balance is. Do I have enough resources to focus on my job? Is my resource and demand in sync? So when these things are not taken care of, that's why I think if you see most wellness apps, the percentage of use and adaptation itself is in the single digits. Yeah, right? And that's like the best. And most often the ones who use these are already healthy and fit people who take advantage of what is being offered. So the question again comes down to, are you really taking care of your employees? Are you really thinking about their resource and demand that they have for their work? Are the resources available? So yeah, I think it's always systemic.
What I would add there is that, sometimes if these are seen as HR initiatives, right, rather than see it as a business initiative. So one practice that I've seen in a few companies is employees have employee resource groups, right, where caregiving employee resource group or parents, etc. Right. So what they would do is while HR might drive it from the back end, it is really people, and there are assigned very senior leaders who would be responsible for it, because while we did say leaders don't care and all of that, there are a lot of leaders out there, right? And the beauty about employee resource groups are the leaders who care will actually be there, right? So if there is a combination of strong leadership and a bunch of few employees who care and makes a difference to them, and if they're able to create that awareness around, I've seen elements like your wellness apps, etc., being used, but yeah, somebody has to push. Either HR pushes or this team pushes. But
it has to be a joint thought.
It has to be a divide. It has to be like everybody owns it.
Correct. Very true.
Ever adding to it, I have been on the other side. So I've been that HR person who will be driving and then, running around, putting my tea. I want 100 people sitting, all the chairs has to be filled. So, I have done, all of the HR people can relate to this. So when I started my venture, I was like, oh my gosh, I will never do that. I will never bring into that. So we do a lot of the engagement infused programs, so the learning can become very interesting. So we bring in dance therapy, music therapy, drama therapy, narrative stories. So our retreats also has that. So when I see a lot of people are doing that, not just us. So what happens is when the learning is a lot more fun, and it is not, and in communication we don't, somewhere in our research, what we have seen is the moment you use saying that this is a mental health, we feel only if I have a problem I go. I don't look at it as a as a general, like, you go for a fitness, even if you don't have a diabetes, you will still go for a walk. Right? But in mental health, there is a mindset already that
Yeah.
I have a problem, then I will jump for a mental health, some issue. They have some
Exactly.
problem.
Yeah.
So this stigma is a very big stigma for us to break in a day. So rather than that, if we say, that's why we use the word emotional empowerment, where you are in charge of your well-being, and and when you infuse all these creative, expressive things, people love it. At least the Gen Z love it. So like
Yes.
sir was saying, like, in terms of orientation, etc. When you use these things, modalities with youngsters, they love it versus someone coming and telling, like, okay, this is the data, this is the number, this is the 5 things you should do in the morning, you should go for therapy. No one does that. Like, it's for me, at least, this has been some of my insights.
All the chicks left are fun.
I want to bring an important point to the audience, all of you. Like the wellness of an employee is not limited to the time spent in the organization. Like what happens after they go from the organization? Like for example, I go to a swimming pool. Parents come to leave the children. They're all in mobile phones. In the metro, you travel. None of them look at anybody. They're all in the mobile phones. The consumption of social media has increased so much. What is the effect of it on the wellness of a general person and also the employee? Is there any studies done in that? And has there been captured? This data has been captured, and what is the influence of that on the mental health? Is there any data? I think we should look into all these things because nowadays you travel anywhere, nobody looks at you, they're not bothered, they're always in the mobile.
Right.
So what is the impact of that on the
I completely agree with you that this has impacted societies and individuals and organization in a way. So just gathering my thoughts here to what you also said, that most of the organization, I think we also require creative problem solving. I so agree with it because when we also tried a couple of things, and it doesn't have to be always labeled as that you're doing it for your wellness. It could be very differently labeled. It's also about how you're marketing your wellness initiatives in an organization so that employees don't feel that they have to be a part of it, but they're naturally coming into it because they're so interesting and they really feel interested, and that's the true impact. And talking about the technology part, yes, it has both its pros and cons. While everybody's on phone, but it's also made us so close to just few quick probably ways to read about how we are going, how we can feel better, or the apps that we have, whether it's through an EAP or other ways. And I would say it has both pros and cons. I'm feeling stressed, so let me do the breathing exercise. It is just putting a band-aid. It's not really, solving the root cause, but it's helpful as well in that
all
moment.
the time where content consumption only is happening? Yes.
Yeah,
That's what in content. There is no rest to the brain. Brain is always engaged in certain things. So that will going to impact the mental health. Now, if the organization only focus on the tip of the iceberg, what is below that?
yeah.
Are we looking into it? Is the organization woken up for that reality?
So
I would like to hear from
one thing, Doctor, one thing that we forget is we're asked to leave vulnerability at the door and come up with professionalism. The westernized concept of individuality, high professionalism, masculinity coming into picture here. We're not allowed to share, right? Even when we make these share groups in our workshop sessions, you still see if people talk a little bit about what is that causing a problem, they have to do it in front of colleagues they work with, in front of managers. They are responsible for their next hike, next promotion. How do you really be vulnerable in this shared space? So that is one of the reasons why people keep their mental health issues or whatever it is inside and show that I'm professional, I can handle whatever comes to me. So I think that's one big reason. And what you said, doctor, I see so many clients come with eye issues, right? Like dry eyes. It's a physical health symptom, but it is because the break that you take from your work goes back to your phone. So yes, quite a lot of messages about how you can improve your eye health. These things anyway go to employees. But I think the crux of the issue again remains, when we are asked to be professionals, does it mean leave something of yours behind? And is that what is actually causing people to not take help, right? Mental health is such a taboo in India. are we making it even more taboo in corporate spaces? Because if you have a mental health issue, then you are not fit enough to raise the corporate ladder.
So what Shishal, I just feel that corporates nowadays focus is they are pressing the accelerator and the brakes simultaneously. That's what is happening. Sometimes they may be little bit accelerator, but most of the time they are pressing the brake. So nobody comes out in open and being vulnerable, and being vulnerability is not cannot be seen. So this is something we should all think about.
But I think we've come a long way from maybe when I started my career, right? Because I think there's more awareness nowadays where I don't think, when I started my career, we ever even spoke about stuff like mental health, right? Now, the fact that we're sitting here and talking about it, we've come a long way, but there is absolutely leaps and bounds that we need to get there. So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree to you. I agree with you. Like back then, for example, if we were talking about wellness and overall wellness, even mat leave for that matter, it was 3 months. Now it has 6 months. So of course, like you said, the shift is there, and like you were saying that it's slow. Yeah, it is slow, but we also need to look at it. This more than speed, the quality of it. So it's okay if it's slow, but it should be impactful, and it should yet again in the DNA. And at the same point of time, with this technology bit, like you were saying, eyes, and you were also saying that people are always on their phone, and that's so true. And they're on their laptop or phone or quick consumption of Instagram reels and so on. But at the same point of time, when it comes to well-being, it's also made it very accessible. Maybe working from a remote location. I do not have access to a therapist or a wellness coach or a nutritionist, but because my organization has a EAP, and because of that, I can get free support for me and my family over a video session. While as a therapist, I would say that's not the best mode, but it's reaching out to more people. So I have both like thoughts around it, that where is that it's dehumanizing factor, and where is it helpful? Like it's a very gray area to talk about, I feel.
Yeah, I think technology can do immensely good things. For example, we're talking about how everything is reactive, right? But using surveys, using data analysis, you can actually become more preventive and figure out where the burnout is coming. If you see patterns, if you see where the stress is coming from, and doing sort of interventions, that's where technology comes in. But also, again, trust and data privacy comes into picture. Will an employee want to put that in an app which is accessible to the company? Is the company using that data? So all these are, I think that's one of the reasons why employees don't want to use it, and it's a single percentage of users, because it's a lot of private data coming in, physical health, mental health, and is the privacy going to take?
But I think a lot of companies have most of the EAPs, I think, have a contract of confidentiality that apart from the numbers, no other information detail is required. But yet the point is, because of, let's say, my certain experience with my organization, my manager, my teammates, can I trust the EAP? Yes.
One thing I want to share, like of late I've been seeing in the news and papers, employees jumping out from the terrace. And so before somebody commits suicide or something like that due to stress, they would have given so many clues to the people around them. With this wellness program, does it catches this and then prevented that? Is it applicable? Because one life lost is such a distance. So are our wellness programs designed to identify somebody taking that extreme step? And before that extreme step, they would have given a lot of warnings to each one of the people around them, whether it is HR or their colleagues or anybody. Or the people tuned to identify that and prevent it. Once a person trying to take that step, if they stop it, then it will not happen. So this is
So what I have seen is, again, that might not cover all aspect of it, but like all the EAP practices, I've seen EAPs actually come forward and have very specific sessions for employees as well as the managers, and they talk about every aspect, even people who are going through various challenges in life. So what EAP essentially does is it actually has something called manager referral, where a manager can encourage, because this is somebody's private information,
Right.
and somebody is sharing in confidence. Sometimes a person can actually, I can just go back and say, I am so angry, I just want to jump off the cliff. I might say it in anger, or I might say it whatever. So for a person to take help is really personal to the individual.
The person who will tell like this will never do that. But the person, it is like a depression is like an invisible prison. And they'll be able to tell the clues. Are the only colleagues who are able to observe, they can catch that.
Necessary. Yeah.
And it is not so easy also.
Yeah. Correct.
And
That even our programs has to be focused on that only. No,
But at the same point of time, that
is what you're talking about. Like when I talk about, and coming back to the point of technology, I'll just go a little back on the technology part because that's more important. That, when you talk about technology, I think technology is an enabler,
yes.
right? So technology cannot I personally don't believe that technology, I will be very comfortable chatting with an AI,
Yeah.
telling things and my problems of life, and the AI coming and giving me suggestion. Of course, I'm sure it will be advanced in many multiple roles, but I still feel the warmth that I have, and that this is science, right?
Yes.
The reason why you say, like, human interactions are required, that the warmth that you have, the connection that you have, the energies our body gives
us.
away
Yeah.
are very important. That's a biophysics, and we cannot ignore biophysics in the era of technology.
And that's what safety is about.
Yeah.
Feeling
So
safe.
safety is about the biophysics, which we
Yes.
often ignore. And biophysics is a huge domain in the material space,
Yeah.
which the world do not know. And I hope it will be, coming and discovering more. So we cannot, kind of, I will love to speak to Hema, look at her smile. But if Hema is in a name of an AI technology, I don't know how much I will reveal. But is it an enabler? It's a huge enabler.
Yes.
Like we also are using technology in something called as, match my therapist. So if I have a particular problem, I'm able to screen that, okay, who can be the right person for me?
Absolutely.
Whether should I go to a Hema, whether should I go to Shefali, who can be the right person basis my demography, my budget, my etc. And I my technology is mapping, but I still believe I would love to speak either a Hema or a Shefali, and I will not like to speak to
AI.
a chatbot, right? That has been done multiple ways. It's helping in a lot of places because you don't have so many practitioners in the world. So definitely there is a space for them. Students are using. There is a scale wise, it's easy to scale through technology. But at the same time, it's an enabler.
Yeah.
It will give us deeper nuances of an individual and help to serve the individual with what exactly the individual is required. But it will always stay as an enabler.
Absolutely.
And to the point of suicide is a very, very different aspect. Suicide is probably a person being in chronic depression for a certain amount of time. And they have probably learned to even cope and know that, some very, very famous celebrities have committed suicide.
Yeah.
And they are surrounded with all kind of experts around them. Right? So have they not got the clues? Forget about corporate. So why are we bringing this back to the corporate? So I feel there are certain boundaries we all have to understand, that we can't say everything up that, corporate has to take care of people committing suicide.
Yeah.
Because, we can always educate, aware, build resilience, create a system which is safe, give a better work-life balance, ensure that the burnout are reduced. All this we can do, but still, that individual conditioning, childhood traumas, we can't do everything, and we should not even get into that space.
Yeah, that's what there comes that initial when the person joins, what type of person that person is, how do they react? That it
Best difficult. There psychological assessment in this word
That can do that.
to assess anyone completely. So if I do an assessment, that might come very different in Korea versus if I do an assessment to my US client. Even any parameter. That's one of the biggest challenge in psychology, that all these assessment parameters of depression or anything are very differently. Markups are very different in other countries, Caucasian country versus Asian country.
Absolutely.
we need to develop for our country because what We adapted from
So I will just go back to what Trissa was saying earlier, that there's something also about you can't force somebody to take health. It's not just corporate responsibility, it's also an individual's responsibility. My corporate, my organization can have the best of the programs, but if I'm not willing, then nobody can do anything, not even my parents. I could be closest to some ex person, my partner, my colleague or anything, but it's also not fair to say that the corporate has to assess everything and have to label you as per that. And also, not everybody, let's be realistic, not every individual also has the capacity or capability to understand that this person or my colleague is going through a certain phase, and I should be behaving or treating them this way. We can't expect every human to be that intelligent as well. So that's my thought on this. But if I were to ask all of you here that what is that one shift that we feel organizations require in this era or at this point of time to bring it so that the wellness as a concept, and that's not just about mental wellness, it's also about the nutrition. We were talking earlier about it, that it's also the basis. It's not just about weight loss or weight gain. It's a lot got to do with sleep and n number of factors. What is that one shift that organizations you feel need to bring to ensure this whole well-being as a concept is more impactful and employees are feeling more connected or they feel that they're associated with their organization and it's just not a workspace but somebody who takes care of me? What are your thoughts?
So, what I'd say is there are a lot of things that have already happened and will continue to evolve.
Yeah.
But so what I'd see is like workspace is like a ecosystem, right? And wellness is like soil, which is helping nurture that ecosystem. So it's all about how you nurture it. Be it your employees around you, be it HR, be it leadership, where you're constantly nurturing it in terms of your policies, procedures, how you show up to employees, and it should be in your DNA, right? So it has to be just a constant reminder, awareness, exchange, sharing, vulnerability, all of that put together. I think that's the way to go.
Thank you.
I feel, while of course she covered almost everything,
She spoke for all of us.
but I would reiterate one thing, which is the capacity to fail, the allowing people to
Beautiful. Yeah.
right? We don't allow people to fail anywhere.
Yeah.
Parents don't allow children to fail. Teachers don't allow children to fail. We don't learn to fail, and the anti-fragility and the resilience and everything to just bounce back after the failure and be the support to let the person succeed after failure. So the permission to fail, if that appetite is increased, so much is on stake every time you fail. If there is a bug and the client is shouting, the escalation takes a toll on everyone. Just allow a person certain capacity. No one can all the time fail, but certain capacity to fail. A high performer can be having certain challenges personally and may not do the best of themselves for certain period. It is okay.
Yes.
It is okay.
Absolutely.
Till that year, maybe there is something going on. Let them be normal and make them understand it is okay.
Yes.
And then you come back next year. And
Absolutely.
you're okay. You're not.
Totally agree with you. Yeah.
Kid parlance, it is said form is temporary and class is permanent. What do you say?
You were saying
Yeah,
something.
so I think all this comes down to managers, right? Teaching managers emotional first aid, about mental health, about how not to give advice, but actually to be there for their employees, to monitor organizational health routinely, right? Yes, there are surveys done, there are yearly engagement surveys done, quarterly engagement surveys, but that's on the company level. A manager is the one who can see that 10, 15 employees and understand their mental health, understand what's going on in their life. So to be there for them, to take the proactive measure. I think proactive is the word instead of us being reactive. That's one thing, because if you see, employees don't leave companies, they leave managers. Yeah. So, managers are understanding, managers are empathetic. I think that's where it starts. That's the grassroots level where we can start wellness. not at the exec level, not at the C-suite level, not at the employee level also. It has to be at the manager level. I think that's my opinion.
The one point I would like to put is that all these training programs or these wellness programs has to be from ground zero. The inputs has to be taken from realistic inputs to be taken what they want, and then design the programs rather than getting a program from top. Oh, just you do this. This has been done in an organization. Find out. So that what happens is that completely deviates from what they need. They might be needing something else, but you are giving them something else without knowing that this is not what is not needed. That's why there is an employee engagement for their benefit. So after some time they'll all have to come 100% they'd be involved. Why they are not involved? That means you are getting something which is not for their liking or not for their requirement. So that is what I would like to say.
Sure. And I agree with all of you in my personal opinion as well. I think it's not about thinking on the lines that what benefits or what should I have for the company, but it's more about what will help my organization and my people. When that my people term comes in your mind, for them to thrive and feel that they're taken care of, that shift automatically happens, and all the points that all of you have mentioned start coming up, because when you start taking care of them as your people and as part of your overall like your family, then you also start thinking from the perspective that for us to grow together we need to be with each other. So I think that that's something I really feel, that cultural shift is important. So if we were to just have one word, and probably before we close for today, just one word, what does corporate well-being mean to you?
One word,
Yeah.
woven in, interwoven with the culture and all aspects. Added. Was it
Booster.
Yeah, it provides that boost. Right.
Okay.
Proactive care.
I think you can't restrict it into one book. We all attempt it.
That's the challenge.
Be honest. Be realistic.
Realistic. Okay. I think it was a really meaningful conversation, and yeah, that feeling of belonging only comes when everything is authentic. So I think thank you all of you for your wonderful insights. It was really nice talking to each one of them.
Thank you, Brand Story, and thank you, Shapali.